everyone for joining us for the Columbia Climate School in the Green Mountains information session for summer 2026. My name is Zoë Mahini, and I am the Assistant Director of K-12 and Continuing Education at the Columbia Climate School. And I'm also one of the instructors of the Green Mountains program. I teach about empowerment for youth in climate action and the field activities that we do during the program. And today we are hosting this information session. We actually are hosting it on the third Thursday of every month from November through March from 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. So if you found us today, you're in the right spot. Great. Each session, we're going to spotlight a different aspect of the program, featuring one of our 6 or 7 Columbia Climate School experts who will be teaching in the program. And the expert is going to introduce a topic from one of their lessons to offer a preview of what students can expect this summer. And we're also going to be featuring a program alum who is going to offer an opportunity to hear firsthand about their experience in the program and learn about their climate action project, which is the final deliverable that each student creates to bring climate solutions back to their own community. I would really like to start by briefly introducing each of our speakers here today and allow them some space to share a little bit more about themselves and their work and their climate story, or what inspired them to pursue a pathway in climate solutions. So first, we're going to introduce Zoe. If you go to the next slide. Great. Zoë Mahini is a summer 2025 alumna. So Zoe, feel free to pop in and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Zoë Mahini. I live in New York City, and I am a senior at Horace Mann School in the Bronx. Um, should I share what made me interested in the program?
Or just interested in climate, more generally.
I'd say that what made me interested in climate to begin with was when I found out about electronic waste and how that impacted our soil and our water systems, and how that made me realize that climate isn't really a distant, abstract thing, but it's woven into my everyday life, and it made me a lot more aware and observant of how I choose to be environmentally friendly.
Perfect. Thanks, Zoe. So Zoe's going to come back and share a little bit more about her experiences in the program as well as her climate action projects. So don't worry, Zoe's coming back. But next, we're honored to be joined by Governor Peter Shumlin, the 81st Governor of Vermont from 2011 through 2017 and the former Director of Putney Student Travel. Oh, Pete, I think you're on mute.
Did that work? Sorry, I don't know. My computer is really not
There we
behaving.
go.
I'm live now. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody.
Yes, you're good now.
Okay, I'm honored to be here. I will speak a little bit later, so I'll be brief. But I was motivated by climate as one of the directors at Putney, as someone who's had a very varied career in a number of things, including having the privilege of serving 3 terms as Vermont's 81st governor, sorry. But I was really motivated by climate, not so much that I was born an environmentalist, but I was born on the same land that I live on now, have lived there all my life it's a fairly large farm in Vermont. And I just observed the changes that were happening to the environment from when I was a kid to the more, 20, 30, 40 years. And I was horrified by how fast things were changing. And I realized, educated myself, we have some great Vermonters like Bill McKibben and others who were on climate change early. And I became a zealot because I saw the changes that were happening around us here in the state of Vermont. That's it.
We're joined by Sylvie Littledale.
Thanks, Laurel. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. So I come from the Putney side of this operation, just like Governor Peter Shumlin. I too am a native Vermonter, and so that is what really draws me really close to this project. At Putney, I help design and manage high school travel programs across the world, specifically in Peru, China, and Vermont with this program. I also get to work on the hiring team so that I work with all of the leaders who you'll meet in the summer who spend all day with students and help facilitate this experience. I think my trajectory towards being passionate about climate work is very similar to Governor Shumlin's. I also live on the land that I grew up on here in Vermont. I'm a native Vermonter, and I think my path to really feeling passionate about climate was more through education. And so I think it is more and more important to get young people connected to our natural resources and learning as much as we can about them now so that we can help protect them for future generations. But I am by no means the expert. You'll hear from experts about that in just a little bit. Thanks.
Thanks, Sylvie. And on the Columbia side, we first have Dr. Josh DeVincenzo joining us. Josh, feel free to come in.
Sure. Well, really excited to be here. I think this is year number 5 for me. So I've been lucky enough to be part of this for a while now, and I think what draws me to climate change is every year in many ways. There's always new and kind of exciting initiatives, but the way I started out was having a lot of questions. You know, as a kid, many baseball games rained out, and a lot of curiosity around why that was occurring and what was going on. And I was fortunate enough to have an environmental science teacher for a mother who helped explain many of these things early on. Although my trajectory into climate was more on the business side, and that led towards a pathway of being able to support individuals and households, businesses navigating disasters. So really being on the impact side of the equation. So excited to talk more about that a little bit later on, but that's my story.
Thanks, Josh. And last but not least, also from Columbia, we have Emma Kizavat.
Awesome. Thanks. So, hi everyone, my name is Emma Kizavat. I'm currently the Graduate Student Program Assistant with the K-12 and Continuing Education Department at the Columbia Climate School, which is the department that runs the Green Mountains program. But I'm also currently a graduate student at the Columbia Climate School in the Climate and Society program, and I'm really interested in the intersection of climate, education, and sustainable food systems. And while I've never been to the Green Mountains program, I come from a background in environmental education as a elementary school environmental educator in California. And so I'm really excited to continue supporting the work in climate education in Vermont through this program.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So we're going to move on to our agenda overview. We are going to start by providing a brief introduction to the organizations that are running the Green Mountains program, the Columbia Climate School and Putney Student Travel. We're then going to dive into all the details of the Columbia Climate School and the Green Mountains program. So we'll be talking about program themes, teaching approaches, and an overview of one of Josh's lessons that you would be experiencing in the program. We'll provide a glimpse of a day in the life of a Green Mountains student, sharing some of the highlights of the student experience. We'll conclude by sharing about program eligibility and the application process and next steps that you can take to join us this summer. We will also leave plenty of time for questions at the end, so feel free to put them in the Q&A at any time that they pop up in your head. You'll also have the opportunity to ask them directly at the end of our program. So be sure to write them down, and we're happy to answer them. All right, so we'll start by doing an introduction to Columbia. Columbia University is the 5th oldest institution in the United States and the oldest in the state of New York. And the newest school at Columbia University and the first school of its kind in the United States is the Columbia Climate School. So the Columbia Climate School was announced in 2020, and it's dedicated to advancing interdisciplinary climate research and education with a strong focus on outreach, impact, and partnerships, which is all meant to meet this growing need for solutions to the climate crisis. If we move to the next slide, the key word that I mentioned there is interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinarity is at the heart of everything that we do at the climate school. Climate change is this really complex and wicked problem, and it impacts every part of our life, every sector of our society, from food and water to infrastructure, economies, law, policy, technology, and the arts. We really can't solve this issue by focusing on one discipline alone. It requires creative solutions across disciplines and requires collaboratively creating these solutions. So to ensure that this next generation really is equipped to do this climate work, we need to encourage and incorporate interdisciplinarity across all components of the program. So we include it in our curriculum. We also have interdisciplinarity across our experts and faculty. You'll notice that we invite climate school experts that are climate scientists and modelers, business professionals, financial experts, lawyers, policy analysts, social scientists, you name it, because all of these different fields are really imperative to moving the needle in the right direction as we address climate. And finally, we see diversity and interdisciplinarity in our own student body. So students that attend the program are coming from all across the world, and they're bringing unique perspectives and experiences and talents into the program. We don't expect or want all of the students to come out of this program wanting to be a climate scientist. What we really want students to do is to bring in all of their interests, passions, and skills that they already have, and then enhance their current abilities by equipping them with new knowledge and tools, all grounded in climate science, to empower them to bring solutions to any career that they pursue. Now I want to hand it over to Governor Peter Shumlin to share about Putney Student Travel and the history of the work there.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurel. And what a great introduction. I'll be as brief as I can to inform you a little bit about why Putney is so honored to be working with Columbia University's Climate School with the Green Mountain program. Putney was founded by my parents, George and Kitty Shumlin, the founders at a time when programs like we're talking about, educational programs in the summertime, just didn't really exist for high school students. So think about it. They were World War II folks. My dad had fought in World War II. My mom grew up in occupied Holland. So they'd really been influenced by the war, and they wanted to help bring people together to study in universities, to live in homestays, to travel around the world. But there were no commercial aircraft at that time. So they would go by ship to various countries. And we had programs at various universities. I had the pleasure with my brother Jeff, after we both graduated from Wesleyan University, of joining them in the barn in Vermont to help build these educational programs. And now it's directed, the program is directed by these two women who happen to be my daughters, who work with a team of about 35 folks in an old cow barn on the farm that I referred to a moment ago, helping to create extraordinary summer programs. You're going to hear in a minute from Zoe, one of our alumni of this program, about why she's so passionate about learning and making a difference in the climate field. But my parents instilled in me and in their granddaughters and my brother the same burning desire to make a difference that you're going to hear from Zoe. What is that? They very much instilled in all of us kids that life is more about just, getting a great education, which they felt was very important, learning languages, hopefully having a family and being a great community member. But they felt that in addition to sort of me, the whole spirit of Putney is, what can we do to take the knowledge, the privilege that we have, and turn that into action to build a better world? And there's no better example of that than the climate school in the Green Mountains run by Columbia in this partnership with Putney. Having said that, I ran for governor shortly after I'd been at Putney for a while, making magic happen with students, which is one of my favorite things to do. But I ran at a time when we were in a worldwide recession. All politicians from throughout the globe were talking about economic development, how we can create jobs. President Obama had just become president of the United States, but he was running at that time against John McCain, and there was a lot of talk about how to build jobs. In Vermont, people think of Vermont as being a very progressive state, Bernie Sanders, and a blue state. The fact is that when we elect governors, Vermonters hold governors to a different standard, and we change parties every time we elect a new governor. So since the 1960s, Vermont has gone Vermont has gone Democrat, Republican whenever we switch it up. You're welcome to serve as long as you're willing to run, frankly. We don't tend to throw out our incumbents. I ran for 3 different terms. And then when you move on, it's always that you get replaced by the other party. But we are fairly non-bipartisan state. I only mention that because I ran on a simple platform. I listened to the Democrats running in the primary. I'm a Democrat. And they were sort of saying the same, economic development, job creation. I was hearing from everybody. And so I said, well, I'm going to run. I'm unlikely to win because I'm from the southern end of the state. And frankly, all the people in Vermont are up around Burlington, Chittenden County, where the population is. So they tend to elect their governors up there. But I said, hopefully I'll raise some issues that are important to me. And maybe whoever does win will carry that forward once they get in office. One of the things I really ran on was job creation around climate change. And I said very simply, if we shut down the oil burners, shut down the coal burners, get rid of our leaking nuclear power plant that was aging and leaking, frankly, and move to renewables, we'll do 3 things. We'll create tons of jobs, because whenever you move from one way of doing things to another, you create jobs. I said, we will put money in Vermonters' pockets, because it's my belief that in a state that doesn't produce oil and coal, which is us, we import it all. It's more expensive to do that than it is to build out and run renewables. And third, we'll make a difference in our climate impact that other states maybe will follow. So when I always love being at the climate school to sort of talk about how you connect policy with outcomes. But the bottom line is the first bill that I signed into law helped to set the stage for the program that I had outlined in terms of energy and jobs. And guess what? When I was done after 3 terms as governor, Vermont was the #1 solar state in America. We had created tons of jobs for every 17 Vermonters. One of them was in the renewable energy business, helping this transformation happen. We had quadrupled solar power. Wind power was 11 times what it was when we went in, and we delivered on the promises that we had made. So why the Climate School of Columbia with Putney? Why isn't the Columbia Climate School in New York City where the rest of the university is? The answer is that the leaders of the Columbia Climate School had the vision to say, let's take our professors to Vermont. Let's go to a state that can be a laboratory for students so they connect the dots between the science, the outcomes, the policy, the politics, and how you make a difference. And we'll use it as our laboratory for change for the Climate School in the Green Mountains. So that's a long way of saying, why am I so passionate about this program? Because it is one of a kind. What Columbia University is doing at the Columbia Climate School is more important than ever. In a country, I was part of the Paris Climate Accord, helping to push that through. If you told me 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, that we would be where we are now, where the United States of America is the only state in the world, the only country in the world that has now withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord, not once, but twice, is saying drill, baby, drill, is believing and implementing policies that will undo years of progress. This has never been more important. So what I know and what I share and what I'm passionate about is we use our connections to really get students in close contact with policymakers, entrepreneurs, people who are making money building out the renewable energy revolution and making a difference in Vermont. And I just think it is a unique, unusual program that you will not find anywhere else. So we are so proud to be a part of the Columbia effort. I think what the Columbia University is doing, the climate school, is unique. It's not replaceable. And if you join or are interested in joining this program, if you're passionate about climate science, about changing the planet, about making, frankly, the huge amounts of money that are going to be made as we transform to this path going forward, because we all know that what we're doing is not sustainable. And it's the most important work that one can do. So unfortunately, I have to check out and not stay for the answers, the question and answer session, but I hope you'll join us in Vermont. I'll be excited about seeing you here in the Green Mountains. And this program, in my view, is more important now than it was when we started this several years ago, than ever, frankly, because as the nation moves away from the progress that we've making at a time where we're running out of time, the work has never been more important, and the mission has never been more critical. So very proud of Columbia Climate School for running this program. I am honored, and Putney is honored to be a part of it. Thanks for hearing me out. I hope I see you in Vermont this summer.
Thank you so much, Governor Shumlin, for joining us today, and thank you for your leadership in taking climate action in Vermont. We at the Columbia Climate School are also so honored to be able to work with Putney Student Travel to offer this hands-on and really immersive program for students to become their own leaders in their communities as well. So,
well, thanks for having me.
The Columbia Climate School in the Green Mountains. Oh, thanks. All right, so this program, it's campus-based and it's located in Vermont, as we mentioned. It's actually hosted at Vermont State University's picturesque 165-acre campus. The students of the Green Mountains program are going to be joined by a cohort of solution-oriented folks from all over the world, really ready to take action on climate. We have a foundation of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And our pre-college program shows how climate science, earth processes, and sustainability can be integrated into any career path. Students are going to gain knowledge and skills and tools to identify their own climate pathway and make meaningful contributions in their own communities. This is the 6th year of offering this pre-college program. The dates are July 5th through July 17th, 2026. So it's a 13-day, 12-night program. The fee is $7,290, and this is an all-inclusive fee that covers your accommodations, meals, program activities, field excursions, weekend trips, and the transportation that occurs during the program. This is a program designed for students grades 9th through 12th, as well as rising 9th grade students. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that our alumna, Zoë Mahini, had put in a bunch of her favorite memories from the program last summer. So I'm going to invite Zoë to join us again because I'd love to hear about the experiences that you had during the program. Hey.
Hi. So I think just to reiterate what you said, the reason why I was very attracted to this program was because I felt like it took a lot of my lived experiences and kind of connected it through like science, history, community, and through very hands-on interdisciplinary work, as you said. And I felt like it was a space where my climate education was very grounded and collaborative and reflective, and that was something that I was truly looking for. And I think I have to say, one of my favorite things that we got to do there, I just have to get it out now because I'm so excited, was when we went to Shelburne Farms. It was just incredible. It was one of the most fulfilling experiences I've ever had. Like every animal that you could ever think of was there. And it was also a dairy farm. So we got to learn how they made their cheese. We got to try different aged cheeses and see how they actually milk their cows. Um, and besides the part that it was very fun, I also got to learn like how a farm could be so unsustainable and the ways in which that they are moving towards a net zero emission goal, which is just not something I've ever really thought of, how a farm could release greenhouse gases and how that could affect the environment. And so that was really interesting to learn about. And I also think like going into the program, I wasn't 100% sure like what to expect, but every single lecture and activity that we did really blew me away. And I loved the fact that all the different lectures taught me something totally different. Like there's so much more to climate education and climate science than I even knew about. I had no idea the ways in which like science or climate science even related to like law or like public policy. To me, it was just like science. And so that was something that I really, really, really enjoyed. And I'd say, lastly, something that really stuck with me, and it was during two of the lectures, one of them which you taught, Laurel, about empowering the youth, which emphasized how individuals' actions can create very collective change, and the climate change communication one, which kind of taught me about individual biographies and storytelling and how I communicate climate education to other people, especially through social media. And you said, I don't know if this is word for word, but you were like, individual actions can drive like ripples of change and make really big waves. And that was something that I'll never forget and really has impacted me here on out through the way in which that I approach every day and approach what I learn and how I educate myself, because I always thought that one person or a few people's actions don't really do anything, but I actually think that everyone together can make a really big difference, and that's really something that I took away from the program, and I took away like how I can communicate that to my inner community, my outer community, and everyone that I'm around.
Zoe, I'm so happy to hear that that moment really resonated with you because that is that is really if you there's one thing that you took away from this program, that's it. That we all have to work together. That I know this problem feels massive, it's global, it's overwhelming. And the work is hard, but when we are working together, we really can make a difference. And you're right, it was, ripples of action can really make waves of change. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
I also think now that I'm looking at the pictures, another thing that I wasn't expecting, which I really enjoyed, was the community because of being able to surround myself with people that were just so passionate about the environment and passionate about making a change and really like expanded my thoughts and my thinking. And you can see a few pictures here. It's like kind of the same like group of girls. Like I didn't think that I would like, I don't know, make friends right away or meet like people that I felt like I related to, but I talk to these girls every single day still. And I am really fortunate to be able to have met such incredible people. And um, I'm just very grateful for the program as a whole.
So grateful that we have this incredible community each year that comes together from all over the world. And I think another, like you mentioned it is so beautiful the ability to learn from each other because we have all these different perspectives. People are coming in. About 20% of our student body is international. So it's really special for us to be able to learn from each other, from our lived experiences and what we're learning in classrooms all over. So I feel like I learn from you all as much as you learn from each other and as much as you learn from us. It's really this like multi-directional learning that's happening. So, Zoe, I wanted to know about your future plans. You're a senior this year. What do you have going after you graduate?
I am going to the University of Chicago to study climate and sustainable growth, and I'm really excited. I think as of right now, it's been a little bit like challenging and overwhelming, but I've still been working throughout high school on my e-waste Instagram. If anyone wants to follow it, it's circuit_cycle. And so that is something that I'm really passionate about, and I hope to continue and make a change on, or at least starting on the campus of my new school. And later on, I know we're going to talk about it, but continue to work on solutions towards my climate action plan.
Perfect. Yes, I'm gonna send you a follow. And that's like a separate climate action project that you've been working on that was it developed after the program was over?
I started it the summer before my sophomore year, and I think the reason why the climate change communication lecture really stuck with me was because I didn't feel like I was making a lot of progress through communicating on social media, and I found that kind of taking a step back and hearing what Josh and Hope had to say about understanding who I'm talking to and the setting and how I'm coming across and thinking really about their biographies made me think about it in a totally different manner, because I mean everyone thinks differently and social media is a very powerful place to promote information. And so I think now compared to 2 years ago, I feel like I've made a very strong growth in how I'm communicating the importance of e-waste and proper recycling.
That is incredible. Well, congratulations
Yeah.
on both of these projects that it sounds like a lot has been done and it continues. It's an ongoing process. So that's great. So you're going to hear from Zoe again. Don't worry. She's going to share about her climate action project that she created on the program. And a little later, we're going to hear from Josh, and he's going to talk about that exact communications lesson that Zoe keeps mentioning. So thanks, Zoe. We'll see you in a little bit.
Great. Thank you, Zoe, again for sharing all of your wonderful insights and experiences. And you provided kind of a wonderful setup for our next slide, which is about program themes. So, at all of the pre-college programs at Columbia, we really put a strong emphasis on academics. And so each summer, the program content at the Green Mountains School varies based on feedback that we get from past participants. So here's a list of this summer's themes, and I'll talk a little bit about what that entails. So the science of climate change, that entails more of the science behind climate change. So greenhouse gas effect, introduction to the physics of Earth's temperature, natural variability versus anthropogenic change. Then we also have climate impact. So this is looking at larger global processes like sea level rise, glacial melt, and average global temperature increase over time. And then we'll also look at more of the local impacts, which can vary geographically. Next, we'll talk about climate preparedness and resilience. So this is more about risk and recovery and planning, and we'll talk about the sides of climate adaptation versus climate mitigation. International climate policy and negotiation. This is where we touch on more of the global framework, sustainable development goals, the Paris Agreement, UN climate negotiations, etc. Decarbonization pathways in the energy transition really looks at how we can shift from a fossil fuel-based economy to renewables. Climate justice focuses on the disproportionate impacts of climate change at local and global levels. Sustainability in the circular economy will look at concepts like consumerism and throwaway culture, how to build a new value chain, and achieving sustainable business practices. And then the last two, we have climate change communication and conversation, or last three, climate change communication and conversation. As Zoe mentioned, this is really a course focused on how we can effectively convey climate information to a variety of audiences. Applied solutions is where we'll learn from sustainability practitioners about how they've implemented sustainable practices within their own work. And then finally, climate solutions and collective action. This is learning about local community initiatives and how to strategically include different stakeholders. And it's not mentioned here, but we also focus on some field-based sampling and analysis, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But moving ahead, as Laurel mentioned earlier, we do have 6 to 7 climate school experts that lead lessons and activities throughout the 2 weeks in the Green Mountains program. And as mentioned, these experts are really leaders in a variety of sectors, including climate science, social science, sustainability, finance, policy, etc. And many of our experts teach as graduate and undergraduate professors at Columbia. So we're really lucky today to have Josh DiVincenzo with us. And Josh is going to give a little sneak peek or a sense of what his lesson may look like during the program. So I'll pass it over to you, Josh.
Appreciate it. And just want to start with just thank you to Zoe as well for kind of really tying the themes of what she learned and how she's applying it, and just really proud of kind of how you've taken a lot of the climate communication pieces and made it your own, and probably surpassed with some of the things that we talk about in the course. So just great job there. Um, my name is Josh DiVincenzo. So I work kind of two different main hats here at Columbia Climate School. The first is I'm the Assistant Director of Applied Research Services at the National Center for Disaster Preparedness. So we're doing a lot of different work in the field where we pull some of those insights into the stuff that we teach at Vermont. My second hat is I do teach in the graduate programs at the Climate School, a course on disaster preparedness, and also workshops on climate psychology. So really why I put that in the intro there is what students experience in the Green Mountains is very much what the students are experiencing here at Columbia and at all different levels. And my honest opinion is that many of these lessons are lectures the way lectures are really meant to be taught, because we're able to kind of go through material, but we're able to kind of explain the context behind the material as well, break down concepts. So for any students that are listening to this, definitely no need to feel overwhelmed. You're going to be with a team of instructors, faculty that are very passionate about their material, but also more than willing to engage. to talk about any of the concepts, the principles, down to a way in which it's making sense to people, and you're taking what you need from it. We really hope that many of these lessons are going to be kind of springboards to further investigation as well. So I'm fortunate to teach a couple different sessions that are very different. Somewhat overlapping, but different in Green Mountain. So what I'm going to do is actually give the folks that are on the call the choice. If you'd rather have a glimpse at the preparedness tools and disaster work or the communications work. So if you want to put in the chat either disaster or communication, I'll go with what the first response is that comes in. I'll talk about both at a high level, but I'll tease out the one that we pick in the chat. If you need to know where the chat is here, or the Q&A, it's going to be at the bottom of your screen. Disaster. Okay, perfect. Okay, so and we got a communication. All right, I might talk about both, but I'll start with disasters and probably spend most of the time on that, and then we'll leave communications with kind of a cliffhanger. So the disasters lecture that we do in Vermont is extremely hands-on. So essentially, what we're going to do is run a disaster simulation. We're taking exactly the way that we practice disaster exercises around the country and around the world, and we bring it up to Vermont with the students where we run through a hurricane scenario that would hit Vermont. And what would the different facets of society do? What would hospitals need to be thinking about? What would business need to be thinking about? Politicians and everyone in between. And what we do with this is really stress test what are our social, scientific, economic assumptions on how we will respond to a disaster, with the main objective of reducing the amount of harm that could potentially happen to people, the property in the city, the businesses, and the long-term health of that community. So I'm sure as many folks have seen, there's countless examples of disasters that appear in the news cycle, but there's a science behind how we prepare for those, how we respond to those, and it's very closely linked to how we think about overall climate resilience, climate adaptation. So we'll be connecting a lot of the topics that you will have exposure to in kind of your climate primer courses and the science side into what this looks like when there's a direct impact, a direct effect that is going to challenge communities with really important decision making. I'm always blown away by how students approach these simulations, because we see very innovative uses on how to use social media better, how we can use artificial intelligence, how we're using drone technology. And it's really kind of a fun but high stress activity in a way, where we kind of think through these what if scenarios so that we can better prepare our communities and develop projects and new research, new ideas at that community level, but then at that global level on how to address these things. And it was actually a few years ago where we were running a disaster simulation on if Vermont were to flood, right around the Castleton area and just in Vermont more generally, what would happen. And actually, a few days later, I think maybe like a week later, Vermont actually did flood at quite a large scale. So all these things that we're bringing into the classroom have very, very real life implications. And this is kind of a low stakes, safer environment to kind of talk about some of these critical issues that touch upon all of these different fields, these majors that we might be interested in studying down the road. So that's a little bit on the disaster side. It's a lot of fun. We really get into it. We use real flooding data, risk assessments, all of that, and bring it into confirming why we make certain choices. In that same kind of thread, we know from the psychology of climate communications and conversations, there's a lot of choices that need to be made, right? And there's a ton of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of reluctance, and I'm sure folks have maybe encountered even frustration and anger around the theme of climate change. So what we do in the climate communications and conversation sessions, they're actually two different sessions in the sense that communications is going to give us kind of the foundations of why this is actually a much more challenging thing than it may seem. And then conversations is we actually practice, right? We use the advantage of being in that low risk environment to look at what if you're met with confrontation when it comes to climate communication. How do we curate the messages around what Zoe was mentioning, that personal biography? What about that person's value systems, belief systems helps frame how they see the world? And instead of kind of meeting it with more tension, we look to see how do we create conditions, environments in which this can actually be a productive conversation where we can move initiatives forward. So it'll be a very key piece for moving projects that you develop over the summer to those next stages in terms of the framing, in terms of the discussion of climate change more broadly, and connecting many of these concepts that may at once feel very separated and disjointed, but are actually very intertwined and important to unpack. So I'm really looking forward to another summer going through these things. And each summer, both of these sessions, all of these sessions bring in new information, new studies, new disasters to look at, new psychology to examine when it comes to climate change. And I'm always learning from the students as well. So it's going to be a lot to cover, but we have been able to do it many summers in the past, and I'm looking forward to what this group will bring. So with that, I will pass it to the next speaker, and I'm happy to stick around for the Q&A a little bit later on. Thanks all.
Wonderful. Thanks, Josh, so much for that preview. And kind of going off what you mentioned about the different ways that you engage students throughout your different lessons, I'm going to speak a little bit about the types of learning modalities and educational activities that students get to experience throughout the 2 weeks. So the first is a collection of different speakers through our speaker series. We also rely on team building and project-based learning opportunities for students. And we really focus on small group learning environments where students can engage in debates or simulations that deepen their understanding of climate challenges and solutions in a smaller setting. We also use excursions off campus to really showcase practitioners applying climate solutions in their careers and in their everyday work. And then we also have that hands-on fieldwork focus, which I mentioned earlier, and this is focused on data collection and analysis that allows students to gain technical and research-based skills through field-based work. And so students don't engage in their own formal research project due to time constraints throughout the program, but these more hands-on and research-based activities that we provide students with give them a unique sampling of what it would be like to be in a career like a biologist or a climatologist or an earth scientist that is doing this type of work day to day. And then finally, the Climate Action Project, which you'll hear more from Zoe about in a little bit, is where students develop a solution or a plan to address a local climate challenge that their community is experiencing. And then students work on building out that project, and at the end of the program, they will do a short presentation to the rest of the cohort and the climate school experts as kind of a culminating event. And with that, I think we can go ahead to the next slide.
Thanks, Emma. And thanks, Josh, for sharing about the lessons that you teach in the program. I'm now going to highlight some of the place-based and field-based experiential learning opportunities that happen in the program. These are some of the sessions that I teach. My background is marine science and sustainability science. So I am always so excited to bring students into the field to collect their own data, analyze it to better understand the world around them. So the first field exploration that we do is right here on campus. We survey macroinvertebrates in a local stream to assess the water quality. So this is a really accessible methodology that's used all over the country. So it's been proven. And it essentially what we're doing is collecting tiny water bugs that start their life in water before they metamorphose into flying or land insects. So, for example, a damselfly, you may or may not know that it starts its life in water. And each one of these different species have a different tolerance for water quality. So if we find a lot of sensitive species and a lot of diversity, that might be a good indication that the water quality in this area is pretty clean. So this is our first field assessment that we do. And the next one, we look at tree rings. So if we go to the next slide, tree rings really help offer a window into past climate, kind of like a time capsule. So each year a tree grows one ring, and the width of that ring reflects the year's temperature and precipitation, with a wide, healthy ring showing optimal conditions for that species, and a really thin ring is showing that that tree underwent stress during that year of growth. And so what scientists do is they analyze the width of these tree rings to as a proxy for past climate and precipitation and temperature data. And so what's best to do is look at a tree ring and compare it to the local weather records over the lifetime of that tree. So students are doing just that. And at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University, we have a tree ring lab that specializes in this field known as dendrochronology. And we're using the same methods and tools that the scientists in the tree ring lab use as well. So this is a really great way to collect field samples and learn about past climate right here in the Green Mountains of Vermont. The next slide, we are going to talk about one of the culminating activities that bring all the students of the Green Mountains program together for a climate negotiations role-playing game. It's basically a game premised on an international climate summit like Conference of the Parties or COP. So students in groups, they role-play delegates representing specific negotiating blocks or nations, or in some cases, interest groups like the fossil fuel interest group. And across a half a day, students work and debate and negotiate with each other to try and reach a global agreement to keep climate change well below 2 degrees C of pre-industrial temperatures, with the goal of really trying to aim below 1.5 degrees C. And so this is a really great way for students to understand and experience some of the challenges that occur during these international negotiations, but also how to collaborate and find strategies to come to consensus and ultimately reach the goal that we all have in mind. So if Sylvie plays or presses one more time, there's a video of the students negotiating here. So you can see, I think the audio might be muted, but it's a really heated debate. People, they really inherit the roles that they're given. Even if you are a student that is having to argue on the point of a fossil fuel industry, it is a way for you to see the strategies and the mindset of that interest group. So a really powerful activity, one of the favorites among many students. If we go to the next slide. So in our program, we take 3 excursions that allow us to explore climate and sustainability through the context of place in Vermont. So we are leveraging the local community and the environment as a foundation for the curriculum. Our first excursion is the ecosystem extravaganza. So students visit Lake Bomoseen to assess the health of an ecosystem and really to explore system science. They're collecting data across a variety of parameters to learn about the interconnections among them and gain insights into some of the complexities of an ecosystem. Climate has local impacts, and this can be assessed through a long-term data set. And so what we're doing here today is a one-day sampling event. We can't see climate impacts, but what the students are doing is contributing toward this annual long-term database. So once we collect 30 years of data, we will really be able to start to see some trends across, the parameters that we measure. So the first parameter is weather and site sketch. Perfect. So weather observations and site sketching, also known as metadata, this is really essential whenever you're collecting data in the field because it helps put context on the environment and the day itself. Conditions change from hour to hour, season to season, year to year. So no matter what you're measuring in the field, having this background data is critical. So students are looking at the shoreline, looking at the substrate at the bottom, the weather, the wind, and all of that can impact the other parameters we measure, such as water chemistry, which is next. So water chemistry is one of the most important factors that we measure that determine biodiversity and the water quality of this lake. We are measuring temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, and percent saturation. And once we collect these measurements, we can see what the data is telling us and showing how not only each one of these parameters interact with each other, but also how the water chemistry itself can impact other things, in particularly the biodiversity of the area. So if we go to the next slide, great. This is one of the most active and fun parameters that students measure. They're taking a seine net and dragging it through the water in the shallows of Lake Bomoseen to collect some fish. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that once the fish are caught, the net is dragged up onto the grassy area, and the students work quickly together to gently grab the fish and place them into water buckets where we can identify them at the species level later, which is really the important part. That's what we're looking for. So on the next slide, you'll see that we isolate each of the species in a small viewing container, and we use a dichotomous key and examine each of the features of the fish very carefully to identify down to the species level. We then record that data, write how many of each species we got, and that is critical in doing a biological survey. And the last station that we do is the muck station, where students are collecting a sediment core. So sediment cores out in the ocean, they can archive climate history. However, these sediment cores that we're collecting in the lake are very small, so they're not really able to provide us with that climate record, but the process is, largely similar, where you're putting a tube of mud into the bottom of a water body and collecting that mud or that record. What our sediment core is telling us is about the habitat of this ecosystem. So you can see the students are wading in shallow water using a push core to collect a small tube of mud. On the next slide, you'll see the next part of the process is to extrude that mud tube out from the push core that we have. So it's definitely a teamwork activity. A little messy, a little muddy. And then if we go into the next slide, you'll see that the students, once they're able to get that mud tube out of the device, they're able to analyze it. And we can see different layers of sediment, different grain sizes, different types of sediment as well. There are also sometimes artifacts that can be found within the mud that can tell us about different organisms that have lived here, or potentially human influence, such as if we find brick or coal or slag, it would tell us that those are like industrial metals and substances that would tell us that there was a human influence on this lake. So this is all very helpful data for us that we collect, and then we have a conversation about them all at the end. Our next excursion is the Montpelier excursion. So this is an opportunity for students to visit Vermont's state capital. We go to the State House in Montpelier to learn about local and state climate action. And this is really so inspiring for students to really learn about the power of community level change. Students engage in small group conversations with government officials and climate leaders, including a state representative and a climate action coordinator. After our visit to the State House, students have the opportunity to walk around Montpelier, eat lunch, and maybe visit some of the local shops. The students really love going to the thrift store, which was great. I'm now going to hand it off to Sylvie, who's going to talk about our third excursion, which is our Burlington Day that explores different tracks.
Thanks, Laurel. Going off of the off-campus excursion to Montpelier, our second off-campus excursion is to Burlington, which is a larger town in northern Vermont. The focus of this day was really to give students a deep dive and hands-on experience with people and organizations that are actively working to implement climate solutions in the state of Vermont across different fields. So we tend to call this the track day. And the reason we do that is because at the beginning of the day, students get to choose between 4 tracks or focus areas that are particularly interesting to them. In the morning, the group will split up into these 4 tracks, and each track will then go visit 1 or 2 organizations in a hands-on workshop to show the different projects and research and initiatives that they're involved in a specific discipline. So the 4 tracks that we have are biodiversity and conservation, sustainable planning in the built environment, food systems and sustainable agriculture, and climate finance and entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, we come back together for a picnic dinner at the beautiful Bread and Butter Farm, which is nearby, and kind of celebrate before taking a bus back to Castleton. Throughout this day, we have a number of really incredible partners. So I'll briefly talk about some of those now for each of the tracks. So the first track, biodiversity and conservation, is a really cool one because we get to partner with researchers and conservationists in the Burlington area who are involved in different types of conservation projects that are ongoing in the general area. So this is an example. We work with Dr. Alan Strong from the Rubenstein School at the University of Vermont. He runs the Bobolink project, which is a really unique example of collaboration between conservationists and farmers. The habitat and mating areas for these bobolink birds coincide with hayfields that agriculturalists are using on a yearly basis to produce some of the hay and forage for their animals. So the collaboration is to work with farmers to adapt the way that they hay their fields in order to protect the specific window for nesting and reproduction for these bobolink birds. So students get to go out in the field with Dr. Strong, and we actually found a baby bird. We get to see the nests. We get to look at the type of habitat that this project is working to protect. So the next track, sustainable planning and the built environment, is really cool. We actually had the honor of meeting directly with the mayor of Burlington. She was really wonderful, and she hosted a panel for us at the Burlington Electric Department. The panel was focused on discussing Burlington's net zero roadmap, which is a really ambitious project to reach a net zero energy output for the entire city of Burlington. And this involves a lot of logistics and lofty goals. And so students got to talk directly with the mayor about what it looks like to actually implement that plan and roadblocks along the way. In the afternoon, we got a tour from a city planner in Burlington of a new neighborhood development project that is hoping to marry goals on sustainable systems in that urban development and that built urban development along with affordable housing goals. So that's a really cool day. We get to meet with a few different experts there. For our food systems track, this is what Zoe was talking about earlier, and I'm so glad she did because I also love this one a lot. We visit Shelburne Farms, and we actually spend the whole day at Shelburne Farms. We get to meet with their educators there, and in the morning we learn about their gleaning program and what that looks like in terms of contributing crops and produce to the local communities around the area. And then in the afternoon, we do a deep dive into their dairy industry, learning how to milk a cow, how they make their cheese, how all of those processes work, but then also really talking about the dairy industry's relationship with climate challenges and solutions. It's a really wonderful crew of people and educators who work at the farm, so we're lucky to go visit them. The final track is climate finance and entrepreneurship. We split this track into two parts. We meet in the morning with expert Paul Danoon, who is an expert in finances and investing, especially in the climate space. So he talks to us about looking at what funding and financing climate solutions actually look like on a macro scale and a hyper-local scale. So things like what the difference is for financing a mitigative solution versus an innovative solution might look like in different strategies there. So that's the morning. And then in the afternoon, we take a visit to a local startup in the climate space called Wasted. This is a really cool startup. They are actually working to divert liquid and solid human waste and process that liquid waste into fertilizer that we can use in houseplants. We can actually use it in some commercial operations as well. You can see it here. It's called WeBloom. This is a really cool opportunity because we get a tour of their facility, but we also get to talk to them about the startup journey and what funding and proposing and getting investors for a startup like this actually looks like and the work that goes into that process as well. So that's the track day in Burlington. It's a really fun day. Like I said, we cap it off at Bread and Butter Farm with a really fun picnic, and we get to see what they're doing as well for in terms of community engagement and agriculture at the end of the day. In addition to all of these content-focused off-campus experiences, throughout the program, students also just get to enjoy the Green Mountains in the summertime. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place to be, and we're very lucky to have a lot of green spaces right on campus with us. So we do all that we can to spend a lot of time outdoors. A lot of our sessions can take place outdoors whenever possible. In addition to that, we visit a lot of local other natural resources. So we visit a berry picking farm. We go on hikes wherever possible. We also always like to go swimming, in addition to our extravaganza day at the neighboring Lake Bomazene. So we do all that we can on this program to get outside and utilize all of the natural resources, which is a really wonderful way to feel a little bit more connected to all of those spaces while we're doing a deep dive into all of these climate solutions and the climate content. So I will turn it back over to Laurel to get Zoe back on.
Yes, thanks, Sylvie. So we mentioned a couple of times that the Climate Action Project is the final deliverable. So Zoe is here, who's going to share about the Climate Action Project that she developed over the course of the program and where she is now with that work.
Okay. So my CAP project was focused on water security in Cape May, New Jersey. And if you go to the next slide, please. Um, the climate challenge that I was addressing was the fact that because our climate is changing so severely and our water is rising, our sea levels are rising, they're facing severe saltwater intrusion and brackish water. And if you don't know what saltwater intrusion is, it's basically just the seawater that moves into the fresh water in the aquifers, and due to overpumping, it just causes a lot of extra salt water, and it makes it harder for Cape May to get clean water supply for drinking, for agriculture, etc. If you go to the next slide, please. Um, so as I just said before, a big thing I was focused on was the over extraction from the aquifers that has increased the saltwater intrusion, and how climate change exacerbates that cause, and also dealing with it costs a lot of money. So my goal was to come up with initial solutions that could help us move towards a grand solution. So if you go to the next slide, please. So I had three possible solutions that I initially came up with at the start of my CAP project. So on the next slide, thank you. The first one, which was inspired by what Laurel said earlier about the biodiversity survey, I thought about creating a water audit. So there are permanent residents in Cape May, and there are off season and in season. So during the off season, the water is a big, big, big issue in comparison to when a lot of tourists and visitors aren't there. So I thought the first most important thing was to kind of gain a sense of how the residents are using their water. And a water audit, if you don't know, is just like a systemic process that gathers data and allows me to understand like how this water is being used. So alongside, this is just a part of it, but I started with collecting information on like the house type, the size, how many people live there, like behavioral habits, property demands. And this water audit allowed me to just record the water flow rates and the usage estimates. And these figures then helped me think of other possible solutions that would be sustainable, but also beneficial for the community. So my second one, which I hadn't initially thought about before, but towards the end of the program, I realized how significant it was community engagement and education. And so I thought making people aware of the issue, so as we work towards a solution, they can be more conscious of how they're using their water and how they're wasting their water, and to avoid things like, I don't know, washing their car excessively or taking very long showers. And lastly, which I don't know how plausible this would be, but it's concentrate you use. So basically, in Cape May, they have a desalination plant which removes the minerals and the salt through a process called reverse osmosis. And as of right now, because there's so much water that they need, and there's only a limited volume per minute that they can handle, and so when the water becomes saltier, the length of time it takes to remove the salt and the minerals increases, so the membranes just can't handle it. So I don't know if this, well, I do know now, but at the time I didn't know if this directly addressed the water issue, more so a sustainable issue. But I was thinking you could repurpose the concentrated byproducts and the dissolved solids and nutrients from the water treatment, from the reverse osmosis, and turning that waste stream into resources for irrigation, industrial cooling, and creating valuable chemicals like acids and bases. And overall, this reduces the disposal costs, which could then be used for maybe increasing the membranes, the desalination plant, or a new one, um, and just overall conserving fresh water. You go to the next slide. So something that we had to think about for the project were our stakeholders and who would invest and who would be involved in these types of solutions. So on the next slide, originally these are a few of the ones that I came up with. And the first one was the mayor of Cape May, who I actually have luckily gotten the chance to speak to and has contributed heavily towards a solution, just addressing the issue at hand. And since it is a very small community, but is facing a very big issue, I thought that building that relationship would be very helpful. And my second one that I thought was very important, as I said, because of the water audit, the permanent and seasonal residents, since understanding how they're using their water allows me to come up with a like a good solution. And last year, when I did the water audit, not that many people filled it out, so I didn't get very reasonable figures. But I'm doing it again this year, and I'm doing it instead of by paper and going to each person's house. I've decided now to do it online because I think a lot more people will be more responsive to it, and it's a little bit more convenient. And lastly, there are a few other ones, but the main one, in my opinion, were the engineering and the desalination plant teams who could possibly think about concrete repurposing and how the desalination plant could be revived or repurposed. And over since last summer to now, I actually got to visit the where the desalination plant is in Cape May. And I got to see how many membranes and how the reverse osmosis process works. And it's very time consuming. And even though it is a small community, there is a lot of water that needs to be used beyond just drinking for your dishwasher, for washing, again, washing your cars, showering, irrigation, et cetera, et cetera. So addressing that with them in a more foundational logistic sense was very important for me. And just a few other ones. So local media and school districts, again, education and community engagement. The Cape May Environmental Commission goes alongside the mayor as they are residents in the town that want to come and create change. And then I was thinking also the hospitality sectors, um, like hotels, restaurants, local businesses, because so many people go in there. So if you see little posters on the wall, or at least I do, when I see little things like that, it catches my attention and it makes me think about what I'm doing and what I can be doing. So right now, for my current progress, as I said earlier, I'm collecting more data for the permanent residents because in the off season versus the on season, the numbers are just not very reasonable. And so then I'll compare the summer water usage to the winter and fall water usage. And that's what I have for right now. And yes, so this was my climate action project, which I really actually enjoyed because I didn't really think about it in this sense. I kind of just sat and was like, I want to make a change, but I don't know how. And alongside that, we made posters of our climate action plan and we got to put them on the wall and everyone got to see them. And it was really nice to kind of gain a sense of what other people were thinking and how many interesting and unique and creative ideas there were. And so for my stakeholders, I gained a lot of inspiration from my peers because I never thought about like the hospitality sectors at all, or I never really thought about how the school districts could make a really big difference. So that's my climate action project. Thank you.
Zoe, that is incredible. You've done so much since the end of the program. I'm
Yeah.
really impressed. It's amazing. And it sounds like, I mean, the work is just beginning. You have, a whole nother round of audits. And I love the emphasis that you put on stakeholders because as we mentioned before, like this is a collaborative effort. We can't do it alone. And that's the way we make big change. So great job.
Thank you.
I'm now going to pass it over to Sylvie, who is going to share more about eligibility applications and next steps.
Thanks, Laurel. Hi again. So down to the logistics of how you might apply for the Columbia Climate School program. The first step is to visit our website. There's an apply button. There's also a lot of information that you can access there, resources on telling you what you might expect. So we run a selective application process for entry into the program. As Laurel mentioned earlier in the webinar, the eligibility requirements, students in grades 9 through 12 and motivated rising ninth graders are eligible to apply for the program. What you can expect when you go to submit your application, you'll input a bunch of information about yourself, about your school, about your grade, and then you'll be asked to secure your spot with a deposit. That deposit is a $700 deposit made up of a $200 application fee and a $500 deposit on your tuition. Then you will be asked to provide an application interest statement. So this is where you get to tell us why you're interested in the program, how you might contribute to the community, and why you're really excited to dive into these topics. And then in addition to that, you'll be asked to provide 2 teacher references for your application. And from there, we will be in contact with you. We're always available to answer questions about the next steps and the application process. Our application does not have a deadline. We accept applications on a rolling basis. And so we encourage you to apply anytime throughout the year, but spots do fill up, so the earlier the better, and you can always be in touch with us about that. I'm also really pleased to share that we are offering, once again, scholarships, full and partial scholarships that are awarded on a need-based eligibility requirements. Eligibility for scholarship does follow the general eligibility requirements in terms of age range. There are also specific eligibility guidelines based on need-based financial situations that you can find in detail on our website. Scholarships are available for students who currently reside in the US, and the application process is similar, though it is separate. So we encourage you to go to the website and follow a separate link for scholarship applications, because you don't need to submit a standard application in addition. The scholarship application is plenty. You will be asked to provide 2 teacher references, a few applicant statements, and some financial information for your family. This application does have a deadline of March 15th, and we also always encourage you to give us a call. Let us know if you have any questions. We would love to work with you on this process. So I will turn it back over to Laurel. We are ready to start taking questions.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for all of our guest speakers. Governor Peter Shumlin, Zoe, Dr. Josh, thank you so much for joining Sylvie, Emma, and I to share about the wonderful Green Mountains program. We have all of our program information here, our website. To learn more information, please email us at learn@climate.columbia.edu or columbiaclimateschool@goputney.com. You can also call Putney Student Travel if you have any questions about the admissions process or the housing or any of the logistical travel components. And of course, we're also happy to schedule one-on-one appointments if a question isn't popping up now for you, but it does later. We're happy to have those conversations with you.